My name is Madeline, and at 28 years old, I was lying in a hospital bed with 17 stitches across my forehead when my father's text came through, "We're busy." Two simple words that finally revealed 28 years of truth about where I stood in his priorities. The car accident that nearly killed me became the moment that saved my life because it showed me exactly who my family really was. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from today. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt invisible to the people who should love you most. Growing up in Westport, Connecticut should have been a dream. The tree-lined streets, pristine colonial houses, and country club memberships painted a picture of perfection that everyone envied. My father, Richard, was one of those corporate lawyers whose name appeared in the local paper whenever a big merger went through. He had this corner office on the 40th floor of a Manhattan high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows that made him look like he owned the world. And maybe in his mind he did. My mother, Grace, died when I was 7. Pancreatic cancer took her in 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. I remember sitting in that sterile hospital room, her frail hand holding mine, as she whispered that Daddy would take care of me, that I'd never be alone. She made him promise right there with me, watching that I'd always be his priority. He cried that day. It was the last time I ever saw him show genuine emotion. Diane entered our lives exactly 13 months after Mom's funeral. She wasn't evil in the obvious way that stepmothers are in fairy tales. No, Diane was clever. She came with 2 children from her previous marriage, Brad, who was 3 years older than me, and Chloe, who was my age. Suddenly, our quiet house filled with noise and demands and competitions I didn't know I'd entered. The shift happened gradually, like watching the tide go out. First, it was small things. Dad would forget to pick me up from piano lessons because he was at Brad's baseball game. Then it became bigger. The summer vacation to Martha's Vineyard that Mom and I had planned became a trip to Disney World because Chloe had never been. My bedroom, the one Mom had decorated with me, was moved to the smaller room down the hall because Brad needed more space for his sports equipment. By high school, I'd learned my role in this reconstituted family. I was the quiet one, the one who didn't make waves. Brad was the golden child excelling in everything from lacrosse to debate team. Chloe was the princess demanding and receiving attention, with her dramatic flair for theater and dance. And I was just Madeline getting straight A's that went unnoticed volunteering at the hospital, where Mom had died trying to honor her memory in small ways that no one else seemed to care about. When I told Dad I wanted to become a special education teacher, his disappointment was palpable. We were sitting at dinner, the monthly obligation, where I was invited to the family table, like a distant relative. Brad had just announced his promotion at Goldman Sachs, and Dad's face had glowed with pride. Then I shared my news about getting accepted into Columbia's teaching program. The silence stretched until Diane filled it with a patronizing smile. "That's sweet, dear. Teaching is such a noble profession. For those who can't do anything else," Brad had added with a laugh. Dad didn't defend me. He just sighed and said he hoped I understood that my career choice meant I'd need to be financially independent. The trust fund my mother left wouldn't last forever if I insisted on pursuing a job that barely paid above minimum wage. That was 5 years ago. Since then, our relationship had dwindled to those monthly dinners where I sat at the edge of conversations about Brad's investments and Chloe's latest auditions. I'd share something about my students, about the breakthrough with a child on the autism spectrum, and watch their eyes glaze over. The only time Dad showed interest was to remind me that Brad's college roommate was single and worked in finance. Wouldn't I like to meet someone with ambition? The morning of the accident started like any other teaching day. It was a Thursday in March, the kind where winter finally loosens its grip on New England. I'd actually had a conversation with Dad the night before, if you could call his voicemail a conversation. He'd called to express his disappointment that I'd missed Brad's engagement party that weekend. My excuse, attending a special education conference in Philadelphia, wasn't acceptable. "Family comes first, Madeline. Your brother's engagement is more important than some teacher's meeting." I'd listened to that message 3 times each replay, twisting the knife deeper. Your brother, not your stepbrother. As if Brad and I shared blood history, anything beyond a mailing address that I'd long since left behind. I typed out 5 different responses, deleting each one. What was the point? 21 years of being pushed to the margins had taught me that fighting for space in their world only left me more bruised. The drive to school that morning was my sanctuary. 25 minutes of NPR and coffee watching suburban Connecticut wake up. I was thinking about my student Marcus, how his face had lit up yesterday when he finally read a complete sentence without help. These small victories were my world now, so far removed from the corporate conquests my father valued. I never saw the 18-wheeler coming. Later witnesses would tell police that the driver had fallen asleep, that his truck had blown through the red light at 45 miles per hour. All I remember is the sudden shadow falling across my car, the impossible sound of metal crushing metal, and then a strange floating sensation before everything went black. The moments of consciousness I had before the ambulance arrived are burned into my memory in fragments. The taste of copper in my mouth. Someone saying over and over to stay still, don't move your neck. The feeling of warmth spreading across my face that I'd later learn was blood from the gash across my forehead. And strangely, absurdly worrying about being late for school, about Marcus waiting for me in the classroom. I woke up in Hartford Hospital to the sound of machines beeping and the smell of industrial disinfectant. The pain hit in waves. My head felt like it might split open. Breathing sent sharp stabs through my chest, and my left wrist throbbed with each heartbeat. But worse than the physical pain was the disorientation, the slow realization that I was completely alone. Nurse Angela was the first face I saw clearly. She had kind eyes behind purple frame glasses and moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for decades. She explained my injuries with a gentle directness I appreciated. A severe concussion that would require monitoring, 3 broken ribs that would make breathing painful for weeks, a fractured left wrist that had already been set, and 17 stitches across my forehead where the rearview mirror had struck me. "You're lucky," she said, adjusting my IV. The angle of impact a few inches different, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I wanted to laugh at the word lucky, but my ribs wouldn't allow it. The first thing I did when Angela left was reach for my phone, which someone had thoughtfully placed on the bedside table. The screen was cracked but functional. 3 missed calls from my principal, Sandra. 1 from Lisa, my best friend in Boston. Nothing from Dad. Nothing from Diane. Nothing from Brad or Chloe. I called Dad first. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Richard Pemberton. I'm unavailable at the moment. If this is urgent, please contact my assistant." I hung up and tried again. Same result. On the 3rd attempt, I left a message, my voice shaky from medication and emotion. "Dad, it's me. I've been in an accident. I'm at Hartford Hospital. Please call me back." An hour passed, then 2. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, creating patterns on the white hospital blanket. I watched those patterns shift and tried not to think about why my father wasn't calling back. Maybe he was in court. Maybe his phone was dead. Maybe. When my phone finally buzzed with a text, I grabbed it so quickly that pain shot through my wrist. But it wasn't a call, just a message. 2 words that would change everything. "We're busy." I stared at those words until they blurred. Then I screenshot the message, though I didn't know why at the time. Later, I'd be grateful for that instinct. Angela came in to check my vitals and found me crying. Not dramatic sobs, just silent tears sliding down my cheeks, stinging as they hit the stitches. She sat on the edge of my bed, something I'm sure violated protocol, and held my uninjured hand. "Honey, where's your family?" I showed her the text. Her expression shifted from confusion to understanding to barely contained anger. She didn't say what she was thinking, but her grip on my hand tightened. "Let me get you some water," she said. "And maybe we should call someone else." I tried Diane next, though I don't know what I expected. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice bright with the particular energy she had when she was performing for an audience. "Madeline. This better be important. We're at Brad's engagement lunch at the club. I'm in the hospital," I said. "I was in an accident." The pause was brief. "Oh dear. Well, that's unfortunate timing. Brad's introducing us to Charlotte's parents. You understand we can't leave right now. I'm sure the doctors are taking good care of you. We'll check in later." She hung up before I could respond. I held the phone against my chest and tried to process what had just happened. My stepmother had just told me that meeting my stepbrother's future in-laws was more important than my potential death. Lisa answered on the first ring. "Hey, lady, how's the teaching life?" I managed to say her name before my voice broke. The story spilled out in fragments: the accident, the injuries, the text, Diane's dismissal. Lisa's response was immediate and fierce. "I'm getting in my car right now. 3 hours, Maddie. I'll be there in 3 hours. Don't you dare apologize for needing me. That's what real family does." When the hospital administrator came in with paperwork, she asked for my emergency contact. I gave her Lisa's information, watching as she wrote it in the box marked next of kin. My father, the man who'd promised my dying mother he'd always protect me, wasn't even listed on my medical forms. Dr. Patel arrived during evening rounds. He was young, maybe early 30s, with a careful way of speaking that suggested he'd delivered bad news before. The concussion was his primary concern. These next 48 hours were critical. I needed someone monitoring me, watching for signs of brain swelling, checking my responses every few hours. Did I have someone who could stay with me? I thought of my father at Brad's engagement lunch, probably on his second scotch, charming Charlotte's parents with his courtroom stories. I thought of Diane, her practiced smile never wavering as she played the perfect stepmother to Brad, while her husband's biological daughter lay alone in a hospital bed. I thought of my mother, how she'd stayed by my bedside for 3 days, when I had my tonsils out at age 6, reading me stories and feeding me ice chips. "No," I told Dr. Patel, "but my friend is driving from Boston." That night before Lisa arrived, I had my first panic attack. It started as nightmares about the accident, the truck appearing again and again, getting bigger each time. But then the dream shifted. I was 7 years old, forgotten at school, because Dad had taken Brad and Chloe to a movie and lost track of time. I was 12, sitting alone at my middle school graduation, because they'd scheduled a family vacation I wasn't invited to join. I was 18, watching from my bedroom window, as they took family photos for their Christmas card. Diane saying one with just the 4 of them would be better balanced. I woke, gasping, monitors beeping as my heart rate spiked. Angela appeared immediately, her night shift presence a comfort I hadn't expected. She gave me something for the anxiety and sat with me until my breathing steadied. "You're safe," she kept saying. "You're going to be okay." When Lisa burst through the door at 10:30 that night, I finally believed it might be true. She looked exactly as I needed her to look: fierce and protective, and absolutely furious on my behalf. She took one look at my face, at the stitches and bruising that had started to bloom, and said with perfect clarity, "We're gonna make them pay for this, Maddie. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but they're going to understand what they've done." The second day in the hospital began with my father's email. Not a call, not a visit, but an email sent through his work account at 6:45 in the morning. The subject line read, "Insurance information needed. Madeline, I need your insurance policy number and claim information for my records. Please forward at your earliest convenience. Also, Diane mentioned you called during Brad's lunch. In the future, please be mindful of timing when reaching out with non-emergency situations. Hope you're feeling better. Dad." Lisa read it over my shoulder, her coffee cup freezing halfway to her lips. "Non-emergency situation. You could have died." The disgust in her voice matched what I felt but couldn't express. I was too tired, too medicated, too something to even cry anymore. The flowers from Diane arrived around noon, clearly purchased from the hospital gift shop. The arrangement was small, generic, with one of those pre-printed cards that said, "Get well soon." Diane's assistant had signed it from the Pemberton family. "Not love, not thinking of you. Just from like a business correspondence." Brad's text came that afternoon. "Hey sis, heard about your fender bender. Get well soon. Charlotte says hi." The casual dismissal of my near death as a fender bender felt intentional, minimizing what had happened to preserve the narrative that I was always overreacting, always too sensitive. But it was Chloe's Instagram that hurt the most. Lisa showed it to me reluctantly after I'd asked if anyone had posted anything. There was my stepsister, all blonde highlights and perfect teeth, posting story after story from Brad's engagement celebrations. The rehearsal dinner I'd been disinvited from because of limited space. The morning after brunch, where my father gave a toast about the importance of family. In one video, I could hear Dad saying how proud he was of his children, both of them, for finding their paths in life. Both of them. Brad and Chloe. I didn't exist even in his public acknowledgments. Physical therapy started that afternoon with a therapist named Mark, who had the patient determination of someone who'd rebuilt bodies before. Just standing made me dizzy. Walking 3 steps left me breathless. My body had been more damaged than the initial assessment suggested. Micro tears and muscles deep tissue trauma that would take months to fully heal. "You're pushing too hard," Mark said when I tried to walk to the bathroom alone. But I had to push. I had to prove I could take care of myself because clearly no one else would. Lisa had taken over my medical advocacy with a vengeance that surprised even me. She discovered things I hadn't known, like how my father had been listed as my emergency contact at work, but hadn't answered when the school called, how he'd told Sandra, my principal, that I'd be out indefinitely and to start looking for a long-term substitute, how he'd already submitted paperwork to my insurance without consulting me, trying to route the settlement through his law firm. The worst discovery came that evening. While scrolling through Facebook, Lisa found photos from Brad's engagement lunch. Time-stamped photos showing my father laughing, toasting, celebrating at the exact moment I'd been texting him from my hospital bed. In one photo, his phone was visible on the table face up. He'd seen my message. He'd chosen to respond with those 2 words while looking at my name on his screen. Sandra visited that evening with 2 other teachers from my team. They brought homemade lasagna, I couldn't eat cards from my students that made me cry, and a level of concern that highlighted my family's absence. "Where are your parents?" Sandra asked carefully. She'd met my father once at a school fundraiser where he'd spent the entire time networking instead of watching me receive the Teacher of the Year award. "They're busy," I said, attempting a laugh that came out broken. Sarah, my teaching partner, exchanged looks with Sandra. "That's not okay, Maddie. You know that's not okay, right?" But what was I supposed to say? That my father loved his stepchildren more than me? That I'd spent 21 years trying to earn a place at a table that never had a chair for me? That my mother's death didn't just take her from me, but had somehow given my father permission to slowly abandon me too? The night nurse was different from Angela, younger and less willing to bend rules. But she did let Lisa stay past visiting hours when I woke up screaming from a nightmare. This time I wasn't dreaming about the accident. I was dreaming about my mother, about breaking my promise to her. She'd asked me to take care of Dad to help him heal after she was gone. Instead, I'd let him replace us both. On day 3, complications arose. An infection risk from one of the lacerations required aggressive antibiotics that made me violently ill. As I shook with fever, Lisa called my father directly. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but it was enough. "No, Richard, she cannot wait until Monday to discuss this. No, I don't care about your deposition schedule. Your daughter could develop sepsis. Do you understand what that means? No, it means she could die while you're playing golf with Brad this weekend." The silence that followed suggested he'd hung up on her. Lisa threw my phone against the chair, then immediately apologized and checked to make sure she hadn't broken it further. "He's not worth it," she said. "But you are. Remember that." That night, my father's assistant called. Not him, but Patricia, the woman who'd been managing his calendar for 15 years. "Mr. Pemberton asked me to check if you need anything from the firm," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Perhaps some legal assistance with your insurance claim?" The firm. Not from him. From the firm. Like I was a pro bono case rather than his daughter. Day 5 brought the infection under control and discharge planning that revealed just how alone I really was. Dr. Patel explained that I couldn't be released without a care plan. Someone would need to help me manage medications, drive me to follow-up appointments, assist with basic tasks while my wrist healed and my ribs prevented normal movement. Lisa had already used 3 of her 5 vacation days. Her boss at the consulting firm was understanding but had limits. She'd need to return to Boston by Monday. The social worker suggested a medical rehabilitation facility, essentially a nursing home for younger patients. The thought of recovering among strangers, being fed institutional food, and following someone else's schedule made me want to scream. It was Lisa who made the decision. She called her boss from my hospital room, explaining the situation with a frankness that made me uncomfortable and grateful simultaneously. He gave her 2 weeks of remote work authorization. She could stay with me, work from my apartment, and ensure I didn't die from neglect. The ride home from the hospital was its own kind of torture. Every bump in the road sent shockwaves through my ribs. The stairs to my third-floor apartment might as well have been Mount Everest. Tom, my elderly neighbor, heard us struggling and came out to help. This 73-year-old man showed more concern for my well-being than my own father. That's when the call from Mr. Harrison came. I hadn't heard from my mother's estate lawyer in 3 years, not since the annual trust fund statement arrived each December. Madeline, I heard about your accident. I'm calling because there are provisions in your mother's trust for medical emergencies. Funds specifically set aside for situations like this. I'd known about the trust, of course. Dad had managed it since Mom died, doling out the minimum distributions required by law on my 25th birthday. He'd always made it seem like the trust was nearly depleted, that Mom's medical bills had consumed most of it, that I should be grateful for whatever remained. Mr. Harrison's next words changed everything. Your mother's trust is actually quite substantial. The medical emergency clause allows for immediate distribution of up to $100,000 without trustee approval. However, I notice your father has been listed as sole trustee, and there are some irregularities in the management I'd like to discuss with you when you're feeling better. Irregularities. Such a clinical word for what I was beginning to understand was something much worse. The call from my father came within 2 hours of my conversation with Mr. Harrison. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. I hear you've been speaking to Harrison behind my back. Whatever he's told you, Madeline, you need to understand that I've managed your mother's trust in your best interest. Don't let some ambulance-chasing lawyer convince you otherwise. For the first time in my life, I found my voice with him. Behind your back, I was in a car accident 9 days ago. You texted me 2 words. Diane sent grocery store flowers. Brad called it a fender bender. And you're angry that I'm accessing my own mother's money for medical care. The silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then in the voice he used for hostile witnesses, he said, "You've always been dramatic, Madeline. Just like your mother. Everything is a crisis. Everything is an emergency. I've protected you from your own worst impulses for 21 years. If you want to throw that away for some lawyer's promises, that's your choice. But don't come crying to me when you realize what you've lost. What I've lost, I laughed, and it hurt my ribs, but I didn't care. What exactly would I be losing, Dad? My seat at the monthly dinner where no one talks to me. The Christmas card where I'm photoshopped in because you forgot to include me in the actual photo. The privilege of watching you love Brad and Chloe, while I'm just the reminder of your first wife." His response was swift and vicious. "If you pursue this, if you challenge my management of the trust, I'll contest every penny. I'll tie it up in court for years. You'll spend more on legal fees than you'll ever recover. And for what? Because your feelings were hurt, that we couldn't drop everything for your minor accident." Minor accident. 17 stitches, 3 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, a concussion that could have killed me. Minor. Lisa had been recording the call without my knowledge, her phone hidden behind a pillow. Later, she'd tell me she'd started documenting everything from day one, sensing we'd need evidence. That recording would become crucial in what came next. After Dad hung up, I called Mr. Harrison back. "I want to know everything I said. Every irregularity, every questionable transaction, every penny my mother left that he's touched." The next few days blurred together. Lisa divided her time between nursing me and researching trust law. What she found painted a picture I should have seen years ago. Dad had been using my trust as his personal piggy bank, lending money to Brad's business ventures, covering Chloe's Ivy League tuition, even paying for the renovation of the house he shared with Diane. Each discovery felt like another betrayal. The $50,000 that went to Brad's failed startup marked as educational expenses for me, even though I'd paid my own way through Columbia. The $30,000 for Chloe's semester abroad categorized as medical expenses. The $100,000 for the pool house that I'd never been invited to use. Mom left me $2 million. The trust should have grown to nearly $3 million with proper investment. Instead, barely $600,000 remained, and most of that was in illiquid assets that would be hard to access quickly. Lisa found the lawyer through her network. Jennifer Huang specialized in trust litigation and had a particular interest in cases involving breach of fiduciary duty. She took one look at our documentation and said words that would have made me cry if I had any tears left. "This is one of the clearest cases of trustee malfeasance I've seen. Your father didn't just mismanage your trust, he stole from you. The 3 weeks of preparation felt like training for a war I'd never wanted to fight. Jennifer worked with the efficiency of someone who'd seen too many children betrayed by the people supposed to protect them. Every day brought new discoveries that made my father's betrayal more complete. We found documents he'd forged, claiming I'd approved distributions I'd never seen. Board meeting minutes for Brad's company listing trust funds as investor capital with my name nowhere on the shareholder register. Even a second mortgage on my childhood home taken out against the trust's interest in the property, without my knowledge or consent. The private investigator Jennifer hired uncovered more. Photos of the family vacation to Greece last summer, paid for with trust funds, while I'd been told there wasn't money for me to join. The new Tesla in Brad's driveway purchased the same week Dad had told me the trust couldn't afford to help with my student loans. Diane's jewelry purchases, each one coinciding with a withdrawal from my trust for supposed administrative fees. But it wasn't just about money. Jennifer helped me understand that this was about power control and the systematic erasure of my mother's legacy. Every dollar stolen was a promise broken not just to me, but to the woman who trusted him to protect their daughter. My physical recovery paralleled the legal preparation. Each day I grew stronger, my body healing as my resolve hardened. The stitches came out, leaving a scar that would fade but never disappear. My ribs slowly mended each breath, becoming less painful. My wrist, freed from its cast, began to remember how to move. Mark, my physical therapist, became an unexpected source of support. He'd seen people recover from worse physical trauma, but he said what struck him about me was the emotional weight I was shedding with each session. You're not just healing from the accident, he observed. You're healing from something much older. 2 weeks into our preparation, I made a decision that Jennifer initially questioned, but eventually understood. I wanted to go to my childhood home to retrieve things of my mother's that I'd left behind when I'd moved out. Not for sentimental reasons, but because I suspected there were documents there, things my father wouldn't have thought to hide. Lisa drove me. The house looked exactly as it always had, perfect from the outside, like something from a magazine spread about Connecticut living. Diane's car was gone, but Dad's Mercedes sat in the driveway. I still had my key, the one he'd never asked me to return because he'd probably forgotten I had it. The house was empty, but evidence of their life without me was everywhere. The family photos lining the hallway included exactly one of me, from high school graduation, tucked behind a larger photo of Brad's Harvard commencement. My childhood room had been converted into Diane's craft space, though she'd never crafted anything in her life. I found what I was looking for in the attic in boxes marked Grace's things that had been shoved behind Christmas decorations. My mother's journals, her letters, and most importantly, her original will and trust documents. Not the versions my father had shown me, but the originals with her handwritten notes in the margins. She'd been so specific in her wishes. The trust was to be used for my education, my health, my future. She'd even written a letter to my future trustee, assuming it would be someone other than my father if he remarried. She'd wanted me protected, provided for, loved. Every page was evidence of a mother trying to parent from beyond the grave, and every page showed how completely my father had betrayed her trust. I took photos of everything, then took the originals. They were mine after all, even if nothing else in that house was. As we left, I saw the pool house through the back windows, the one built with my money for Brad's entertainment. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd literally built their happiness on the foundation of what was stolen from me. Brad reached out the night before we served the papers, his first real contact since the accident. His text was telling, "Heard you're stirring up trouble with Dad. Don't be stupid, Madeline. You're going to tear this family apart over money. Grow up and stop being so selfish." I didn't respond, but I screenshot the message. Jennifer added it to our evidence file, noting that it suggested Brad knew about the misappropriated funds. His knowledge made him complicit, potentially liable. The morning of the confrontation, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and really looked at myself for the first time since the accident. The scar on my forehead was still red but healing. My face had lost the soft roundness of someone who'd never fought for anything. I looked older, harder, but also somehow more like my mother than I ever had before. Lisa helped me dress professionally but comfortably. We chose my outfit carefully, professional enough to be taken seriously, but with visible reminders of my injuries. The wrist brace I still needed, the careful way I had to move because of my ribs. Let them see what they ignored, Lisa said. Jennifer met us at the end of their street. She'd wanted to come alone, but I'd insisted on being there. This wasn't just about legal documents. This was about facing the people who'd thrown me away and letting them know I'd survived their abandonment. The walk to their front door felt both endless and too quick. 28 years of rejection, abandonment, and theft had led to this moment. I rang the doorbell of the house that had never really been my home, holding the papers that would finally set me free. They were having Sunday dinner, of course. The formal dining room was set with Diane's wedding china, the one she'd registered for when she married my father, replacing all of my mother's things within a year. Through the window, I could see them. Dad at the head of the table, Diane to his right. Brad and Charlotte on the left, Chloe beside her mother, the perfect family portrait -1. Diane answered the door. Her face went through a series of expressions from annoyance to surprise to something like fear when she saw Jennifer and the manila envelope in her hands. Madeline, what are you doing here? I didn't answer her. I walked past her into the dining room, my body remembering this path from all the times I'd been excluded from it. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Charlotte, whom I'd never met, looked confused. Brad's face flushed red. Chloe actually gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. And my father, he just stared at me with the cold assessment of a lawyer evaluating a hostile witness. "You look fine," he said, his tone dismissive. "So what's all this drama about?" Those words delivered while looking at my still visible scar, the brace on my wrist, the careful way I had to lower myself into a chair, told me everything I needed to know about how he saw me. Even broken, even scarred, I wasn't worthy of concern. Jennifer stepped forward with the professional calm of someone who'd done this before. "Mr. Pemberton, I'm Jennifer Huang, representing Madeline in the matter of her mother's trust. We're here to serve you with legal documents regarding your immediate removal as trustee and a demand for full forensic accounting of all trust assets and transactions from the past 21 years. She placed the envelope on the table right next to his wine glass. The silence that followed was complete, the kind that comes before a storm. Diane was the first to break. "What is she talking about, Richard?" "What trust?" Brad's reaction was more telling. He pushed back from the table, his face cycling through anger and panic. "You said that money was from investors, Dad. You said it was all legal." Charlotte looked at Brad with dawning comprehension. "The startup money." That was from her trust. Dad hadn't moved, hadn't even picked up the envelope. He was studying me with the same expression he used in court, calculating angles, measuring weaknesses. "This is ridiculous, Madeline. You're being manipulated by someone who wants a percentage of your inheritance. I've managed that trust perfectly legally for 2 decades. Jennifer's voice cut through his dismissal. "Legally, would you like me to list the 18 documented instances of breach of fiduciary duty we've identified? Or should we start with the forged signatures on distribution requests? Or perhaps the $100,000 used to renovate this house, categorized as medical expenses for Madeline while she was perfectly healthy?" Diane stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. "100,000. Richard, you said that money came from your bonus." The facade was cracking. Dad's controlled expression slipped, revealing something I'd never seen before: fear. "You don't understand the complexities of trust management," he said, his voice taking on a lecturing tone. "Sometimes funds need to be moved, invested, leveraged for growth. Like Brad's failed company, I finally spoke, my voice steady despite the pain in my ribs. Or Chloe's tuition. Or your vacation to Greece last summer while I was working 3 jobs to pay off my student loans." Chloe started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "Daddy, tell her she's wrong. Tell her you didn't steal from her." But he couldn't, and everyone at that table knew it. Brad's rage turned on me then, the golden child realizing his pedestal was built on stolen ground. "You're really going to do this? Destroy our family over money after everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me," I laughed, and it was bitter and sharp. "You mean ignoring me when I almost died, sending a 2-word text while I was bleeding in a hospital bed, building your entire life on money my mother left for me while treating me like an unwanted guest at monthly dinners, Jennifer interrupted before Brad could respond. Mr. Pemberton, you have two choices. Sign the trustee removal documents, now agree to full restitution, and we handle this privately. Or we file criminal charges tomorrow morning for embezzlement fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. Given your position in the legal community, I imagine you understand the implications of option two. That's when my father's composure finally shattered. His hand shook as he reached for the envelope. Criminal charges would mean disbarment, the end of his career, his reputation destroyed. Everything he'd built, everything he valued more than me, would crumble. You can't prove any of this, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Jennifer pulled out her tablet showing bank records, forged documents, the trail of theft going back years. We can and we have. We also have recordings of you threatening Madeline, trying to intimidate her out of pursuing her legal rights. Would you like me to play them for everyone? Diane grabbed the papers from Richard's hands, reading them with growing horror. $2 million Grace left her, $2 million, and you stole it for us. She looked at her children, at the life they'd built on my mother's legacy. We're thieves. We're all thieves. Charlotte stood up, backing away from the table like it was contaminated. I can't, she said to Brad. I can't marry into this. Your entire family is built on stealing from her. She gestured at me. Look at her. She almost died, and none of you cared because you were too busy spending her money. The next hour was chaos. Diane screaming at Richard about lies and betrayal, Brad trying to salvage his relationship while Charlotte gathered her things to leave, Chloe having what appeared to be a panic attack about potentially being implicated. And through it all, my father sat silent, reading the documents that detailed his crimes. Finally, he picked up the pen Jennifer offered. His signature on the trustee removal was shaky but legal. The agreement to full restitution, including interest and damages, would drain most of his personal assets. The house would have to be sold. Brad's trust fund from his grandparents would be liquidated. The perfect life they'd built would have to be dismantled to rebuild what they'd stolen. As he signed the last page, he looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before: recognition. For the first time in 21 years, he actually saw me. Not as an obligation or an inconvenience, but as my mother's daughter, someone he'd underestimated, someone who'd survived both a nearly fatal accident and his systematic abandonment. You're just like her, he said quietly. Your mother. She was stronger than I ever gave her credit for, too. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough. But it was an admission. And somehow that mattered. Jennifer gathered the signed documents with professional efficiency. We'll expect the first payment within 30 days. The forensic accountant will be in touch about accessing all relevant records. Any attempt to hide assets or interfere with this process will result in immediate criminal prosecution. As we turned to leave, Chloe called out, Madeline, wait! Her face was blotchy from crying, her perfect makeup destroyed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We knew it was wrong. We all knew, and we did it anyway. I looked at her, this stepsister who'd had everything while I'd had nothing, and felt something I hadn't expected: pity. You built your whole life on a lie, I said. Now you have to figure out who you are without it. Brad's last words followed us out. You've destroyed this family. You've ruined everything. Lisa, who'd been waiting by the door recording everything on her phone, responded for me. No, Brad. You destroyed it the moment you decided her mother's money was worth more than her life. She just held you accountable. We walked out of that house, past the pool, built with my money, past the garden, maintained with my funds, past the life they'd constructed on the foundation of my loss. Charlotte's car was already gone. Through the window I could see Diane throwing things, while my father sat motionless at the table, where I'd never truly had a seat. 6 months have passed since that Sunday confrontation. The scar on my forehead has faded to a thin white line that I don't bother covering with makeup anymore. It's part of my story now, a reminder of the accident that broke my body, but ultimately freed my soul. The financial restitution came faster than Jennifer had anticipated. Dad liquidated everything rather than face criminal charges and disbarment. The house sold within a month to a young family who'd create better memories there. Brad's trust fund, Diane's jewelry, the vacation home in the Hamptons. I hadn't even known about it all got converted to checks made out to my mother's trust, now under Mr. Harrison's careful management. The money wasn't what mattered, though. It was what I could do with it. I started the Grace Pemberton Foundation for special education funding programs for children with learning disabilities. My mother would have loved that. She'd always said that everyone deserves a chance to learn in their own way at their own pace. The foundation's first grant went to my school creating a sensory room that my student Marcus helped design. My father tried reaching out several times through email, each message forwarded directly to Jennifer. He wanted to explain, to justify, to somehow make me understand that he'd never meant for things to go so far. But intentions don't erase actions, and 21 years of choosing them over me couldn't be explained away. Diane filed for divorce 3 months after the confrontation. Without the money, without the lifestyle, she had no reason to stay. She moved back to California with Chloe, who dropped out of her expensive college to attend community college. The last I heard, she was working as a receptionist and learning what it meant to earn her own way. Brad's spectacular fall was perhaps the most dramatic. Charlotte had broken off their engagement that very night, posting on social media about refusing to marry into a family built on theft and lies. His investors, learning that their golden boy had been funded with stolen trust funds, pulled out. The company collapsed within weeks. He lost his apartment, his car, his entire identity as the successful son. He moved in with a college friend in New Jersey, working at a job he once would have mocked. But I don't track their failures for satisfaction. I note them only because they're part of the story, the natural consequences of choices they made. My focus has been on building something real, something that can't be stolen or destroyed by someone else's greed. Lisa became more than my best friend through this. She became the sister I'd always wanted. She helped me find a therapist who specialized in family trauma and abandonment. Through those sessions, I learned that my father's rejection wasn't about my worth, but about his inability to see past his own needs. I was the living reminder of my mother of a love he'd had and lost, and rather than healing, he'd chosen to bury that part of his life and me along with it. I'm dating someone now. Marcus Thompson, a pediatric physical therapist I met during my recovery. He has gentle hands and a laugh that makes me feel safe. He knows my whole story, has seen the scars both visible and hidden, and chooses to stay anyway. When I introduced him to the concept of chosen family at Lisa's birthday dinner, surrounded by the friends who'd shown up when blood relatives hadn't, he understood immediately. Angela, the nurse who'd held my hand that first night in the hospital, has become part of that chosen family too. We have coffee once a month, and she tells me about her patients while I update her on my students. She says I'm her reminder that people can survive more than they think they can, that strength sometimes looks like accepting help from strangers when family fails you. My students welcomed me back with handmade cards and promises to be careful on the roads when they grew up. Marcus, the one I'd been thinking about during the accident, had apparently asked about me every day I was gone. When I returned, he pointed at my scar and asked if I was a warrior now. Yes, I told him. I suppose I am. Teaching feels different now. I stand in front of my classroom with the knowledge that I survived both a physical trauma and an emotional abandonment that should have destroyed me. When I work with children who've been labeled as difficult or different or not worth the effort, I see myself at that family dinner table, pushed to the margins, but still present, still hoping. I fight for them the way no one fought for me. Mr. Harrison helped me understand the full scope of my mother's estate, not just financially but emotionally. She'd left letters for my future birthdays to be opened each year until I turned 40. I'd never known about them because Dad had hidden them in the attic. Reading her words, feeling her love reach across 21 years of absence, helped heal wounds I didn't know could be mended. In one letter written for my 28th birthday, she'd somehow anticipated the possibility of my father remarrying, of me feeling replaced. "Sweet girl," she wrote, "and if you're reading this feeling alone, know that my love for you transcends death. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you're broken, who see your worth when others don't, who choose you when biology fails. Build your own family, my darling. Fill it with people who deserve you." The foundation's first fundraiser was held last month. I half expected my father to show up to make some grand gesture of reconciliation. He didn't, but my chosen family did. Lisa gave a speech about strength and survival. Sandra and my teaching team organized the entire event. Tom, my elderly neighbor, bought the first table. Even Jennifer came, bringing several colleagues who wanted to support the cause. The accident that nearly killed me had revealed the truth about my biological family, but it had also illuminated the family I'd been building all along. Every person who'd shown up during those horrible first days, everyone who'd helped me heal and fight and reclaim what was mine, they were my real family. I still drive past the spot where the 18-wheeler hit me. The intersection has been redesigned with better signals and barriers, partly due to a safety campaign I started with the insurance settlement. Sometimes I park there and think about the woman I was before, impact the one who accepted crumbs of affection, who made herself small to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. That woman died in that intersection. The one who survived, who pulled herself from the wreckage, both literal and metaphorical. She's someone my mother would recognize, someone who knows her worth isn't determined by other people's inability to see it. Have you ever been through something similar, where your darkest moment revealed the truth about those around you? How did you find the strength to rebuild? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes our shared experiences help others realize they're not alone in their struggles. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about resilient survival and the families we choose. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't defined by those who fail to see it. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the family that matters most is the one you build from the ashes of the one that failed you. Stay strong and know that you deserve people who show up when it matters most.